on this edition for Saturday, July 24th. After a year-long delay, the 2020 Summer Olympics in Tokyo are underway. New demands for protected status of Haitians in the U.S. And in our signature segment, refugees fleeing conflict in Ethiopia's Tigray region face challenging conditions in neighboring Sudan. Next on PBS NewsHour Weekend.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Sue and Edgar Wackenheim III, Bernard and Denise Schwartz, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, the Anderson Family Fund, the estate of Worthington Mayo Smith, the Leonard and Norma Clorfine Foundation, the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, Koo and Patricia Ewan, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg. We try to live in the moment to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments.
For 25 years, Consumer Cellular's goal has been to provide wireless service that helps people communicate and connect. We offer a variety of no-contract plans, and our U.S.-based customer service team can help find one that fits you. To learn more, visit consumercellular.tv.
Additional support has been provided by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. The one-year delayed Tokyo Olympic Games are underway, but in a most unusual way. COVID restrictions mean few spectators, if any, but the host country celebrated its first medals today. If you haven't watched, spoiler alert, Japan won gold in men's judo and silver in women's judo. The sport began in Japan 140 years ago. First Lady Jill Biden led a small U.S. delegation in Tokyo, hosting a U.S.-Mexico softball watch party at the U.S. Embassy and attending opening ceremonies yesterday. Biden attended a 3-on-3 women's basketball game between the U.S. and France alongside French President Emmanuel Macron. The First Lady left Tokyo today and will stop in Hawaii, where she will visit a COVID vaccination event. We will have more from Tokyo about the games and the conditions athletes are facing after the news summary. New confirmed cases of coronavirus infections continue to climb in the United States. According to the New York Times database, cases rose 173% in the last 14 days, with deaths rising by 20%. The surge is being driven in large part by the Delta variant, almost entirely among the unvaccinated. Some of the largest outbreaks, according to Johns Hopkins University's COVID tracker, are in states like Alabama, where just over 34% of the population is fully vaccinated. The state has a test positivity rate of just over 20%. By contrast, in Massachusetts, nearly 64% of people are fully vaccinated. The state has a test positivity rate of just under 3%. Meanwhile, several news organizations are reporting senior White House officials now say they expect a booster shot may be needed for those over 65 or with compromised immune systems who received 2-dose vaccines. Globally, some countries are continuing COVID-19 restrictions. In Sydney, Australia today, thousands took to the streets in protest of a return to lockdown restrictions amid another surge in cases. In defiance of stay-at-home orders, more than 3,000, mostly maskless protesters, clashed with police officers. 57 people were reportedly arrested. At least 125 people are dead following torrential rains and landslides in India. The annual monsoon season is bringing the heaviest rainfall in 4 decades. After a downpour lasting several days, parts of India's west coast received as much as 23 inches of rain, pushing dams and rivers to near capacity. Heavy monsoon rains are also forcing evacuations in the Philippines this weekend. This month, from floods in Germany, China, and Japan to drought and fire in the western U.S., severe weather is affecting nearly every corner of the world. Climate scientists say much of the extreme weather is connected to continuing global warming. In Hungary today, thousands of marchers at the annual Pride Parade protested a new law that bans the teaching of homosexuality and transgender issues to children. Hungary's parliament passed a law last month that bans the depiction of gay and transgender people to minors in schools and in the media. The law went into effect Thursday. Several European Union leaders have condemned the bill as discriminatory, and the European Commission has begun legal action against Hungary, which is an EU member. On Wednesday, Hungary's right-wing leader, Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, rejected criticism from other leaders, saying the new law protects children, and announced a national referendum will be held on the issue. For the latest national and international news, visit pbs.org/newshour. The Tokyo Olympics are like no other games, postponed for a year and now facing the challenge of spectatorless stadiums, protests, and threatening weather conditions. For more, I spoke with New York Times Tokyo Bureau Chief Motoko Rich. Motoko, this has been an opening ceremony unlike any other. There weren't any people in the stands. That was the first thing that most Americans noticed when they turned on their TVs last night. And there aren't going to be any in most of the events unless they're outdoors.
Correct. The athletes' procession, which is kind of the centerpiece of every Olympic opening ceremonies, you've got all these athletes coming into the stadium, and they're basically doing it for television because they're waving at empty stands. And so that was kind of weird to see that, and a little bit sad as well, just to know that these athletes had worked so hard to get there, and that they didn't have the people that they would normally have kind of going wild for them as they came in. The athletes are not even allowed in the Olympic Village until 5 days before their competitions start. So I think there were a lot of athletes that haven't even arrived in the country, and so they weren't marching in the parade. So that was a little odd.
How concerned are they, not necessarily maybe to get very sick, but even if they test positive, that could mean that's it, they're not competing?
What we've been told is that between 80 and 85% of the athletes that have been coming to Japan are all vaccinated. So if they're testing positive, it's most likely that they're either asymptomatic or maybe having very mild symptoms. We've only had less than 24 athletes who've tested positive. But of course, if you do, you could be sidelined. So we've seen some announcements, heartbreaking announcements from a few athletes. We have seen some situations, say, for example, like the South African football team, or soccer, as we say in America, that 2 players on the team tested positive, and then that meant the whole team was designated as a close contact. But they were isolated, they were served meals in their rooms, and they were allowed to play. So there was a game that they played against Japan.
What about the fact that all these events that Japan had spent billions of dollars on are sitting empty through these games?
That's right. I mean, they spent about $1.4 billion to build this beautiful stadium and lots of other venues. And I think for the athletes, we talked to athletes because the last time Tokyo hosted the games was in 1964, and it was sort of Tokyo's and Japan's re-entrance onto the world stage, showing the world that they'd recovered from the war. And it was like this huge event for the country. Now that the games have finally started, despite concerns and anxiety and even anger about the Olympics being held in the middle of a pandemic, there's still a lot of people, like, once they start and they know the events are happening, they want to see them.
During the opening ceremonies, what were the protests about? Are they likely to continue?
Well, during the opening ceremonies, because there were no spectators and certain people were sitting, in the media tribune, if they were sitting up high enough during moments of silence, they could hear the protesters outside, or effectively saying, "Stop the Olympics, don't, pull the games." I anticipate that they will go on because there is a segment of the population that's really angry about this. They feel that the priorities of the government and the organizing committee are misplaced, that they shouldn't have gone ahead with the games in the middle of a pandemic. So I think it's sort of a little bit split, that there are people who are sort of excited and have decided, well, the games are going on, we might as well get into the games and the medal count. And then there's another segment that is still very angry and thinks this is very inappropriate, and there are protesters.
This has been a rocky start to the Olympics. Besides just COVID, you've also got a typhoon bearing down, as if things couldn't get worse.
Right. And then on top of that, I mean, even before the pandemic, one of the biggest worries for the Tokyo Olympics was the heat. I mean, July and August are the hottest months of the year. They, in fact, moved the marathon to Sapporo, which is on the northern island. Even before the pandemic, they made that decision because they just realized we can't have people running in those kinds of conditions. And then now we've got, as you say, this typhoon warning. And so some of the rowing races were already moved forward. Races that were scheduled for Monday were moved to Sunday just to get them out of the way in case the typhoon actually does hit Tokyo.
Motoko Rich of the New York Times joining us from Tokyo. Thanks so much.
Thanks for having me.
In November of last year, the Nobel Peace Prize winning Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, launched a government offensive against rebel forces in the northern region of Tigray. At the time, he promised that the war would be over in a matter of weeks, but the conflict continues with thousands dead and 1.7 million people displaced. Last month, the United Nations declared that parts of Tigray are now in the midst of famine. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken called on all parties to commit to an immediate, indefinite, and negotiated ceasefire. Since the beginning of fighting, tens of thousands of Ethiopians have sought safety in neighboring Sudan. But the conditions in Sudan's refugee camps are presenting new challenges. NewsHour Weekend Special Correspondent Benedict Moran and videographer Jorgen Samso report.
Back home in northern Ethiopia, Tewedros Tafara is a doctor in one of his country's largest hospitals. Here in Hamdayat, on the tense border between Sudan and Ethiopia, he's still a doctor, but also a refugee, caring for other refugees. His entire clinic fits into a small room without electricity or running water. He has a laboratory, pharmacy.
And here is where I do some procedures, some wound dressing and wound care.
Tafara is one of the estimated 50,000 people who fled violence in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region, dodging Ethiopian government soldiers and swimming across fast-flowing waters to seek safety in this remote part of eastern Sudan. Refugees arrive with everything from common infections to gunshot wounds.
Last week, we saw 920 patients in seven days.
Not everyone can make it to safety in Sudan. Compared to the flood of refugees that arrived last November, today only a trickle of arrivals cross into the country every week. Just behind me here is Ethiopia, and it's an active conflict zone. Many of the refugees who recently arrived here say they were hunted by militias who are trying to prevent them from seeking safety in neighboring Sudan. Dr. Tafara sees it regularly, he says. Young men killed on their way to safety.
It was only last week that young men drowned when they tried to cross in. They were running from the soldiers who were following them to shoot, and then these young men were running, and then they drowned in the river, and then they died.
42-year-old Shamaya Hamayo arrived just days before we met him. The Ethiopian army attacked his village in western Ethiopia last November, he said. He fled, but was eventually caught. Suspected of being a rebel fighter, he told us soldiers arrested him.
Without any reason, we had to stay for 3 months in Umura prison. Because we are another tribe, we didn't have rights in the prison. My friend had a chronic illness. He didn't get medication, so he died in the prison.
Himayo eventually made it to Sudan. Another friend, who he was traveling with, did not.
We traveled during the night with smugglers, and they almost found us. When we were crossing, one of our friends was shot, and 2 others fled back.
Hamayo no longer has to run for his life, but his well-being is not yet guaranteed. Sudan's refugee camps do not yet provide safe haven. 100 miles further inland, on a remote plain, more than 20,000 refugees were relocated here to Tunaidba refugee camp. When refugees arrive, they are given essential household items like blankets, sheets, and containers for cooking. There is regular distribution of food, including cooking oil and grains like sorghum. But the camp's living conditions are dire. 32-year-old Solomon Gebrehenes arrived here 6 months ago. 10 days before we visited him, a storm blew over his tent. Videos taken by aid workers show wind and rain pounding the camp, causing many shelters to collapse. Aid workers say nearly 70% of the camp was destroyed. Nearly 2 weeks later, much of the camp is still in disrepair. Since the storm, Gebrhinis, his wife, and 4 children have slept in the muddy remains of his shelter or out in the open.
When the wind comes, it's really strong. We fix it in the morning, but by night it's totally collapsed. There's nothing here. There's no jobs. There's nothing. From the morning to the night.
Aid workers we've spoken to say the conditions in these camps are so bad that thousands of refugees have left, choosing to return home to the conflict zone in Ethiopia. Others north to Libya, hoping to reach the shores of Europe. The rainy season will soon bring even more extreme weather. Aid workers like Sergio Score are bracing for the worst. What do you think is going to happen in the rainy season? You've seen kind of the early rains in May, but the rains are going to get really bad probably in the near future. What are you expecting?
I expect an exodus, to be honest, of people. So more people I think are going to leave the camp.
Many of Sudan's major donors are also worried. In a letter to the UNHCR, the United Nations agency that set up the camps, ambassadors from the US, EU, and 6 countries expressed, quote, serious concern about the UNHCR's leadership and requested urgent action to improve the camps, writing, the safety, security, and dignity of refugees is at severe risk and lives may be lost. The deputy representative of UNHCR Sudan, Fatima Mohamed Cole, told PBS NewsHour that the agency is working to improve the camps, but she did not provide specifics. Were mistakes made by UNHCR?
All I can say for now is that we're working against nature, we're working against time. What they've highlighted in the letter is worrying for us, particularly as a protection and a humanitarian agency, and these are issues that we take seriously.
With ongoing fighting in Ethiopia and even a potential famine there, aid agencies in Sudan don't expect an ebb in new arrivals. Back at the Humdayat border crossing, Tewedros Tafara continues to work from dawn to dusk. His wife and children remain in Ethiopia. Unsure when he'll see them again, he finds meaning in his daily work as a doctor.
How do you feel being a refugee and also helping other refugees?
It's very difficult to describe, really, because we are in a very new environment with practically escape for our lives, and we run out of our places with nothing on our hand. So we have to deal, we have to sleep on the ground, we have to eat whatever we're supplied with, and we have to drink whatever we get. I'm trying to handle it in a way that I tell myself every time that it's okay, I'm trying to help.
Gunfire disrupted the funeral of slain Haitian President Jovenel Moïse yesterday, again highlighting political tensions and violence in the country. For Haitians in the U.S. and those waiting to enter at the southern border, the violence in Haiti is prompting calls to stop deportations of those who do not have temporary protected status. That status was granted and extended as a result of the catastrophic 2010 earthquake. NewsHour Weekend's Yvette Feliciano spoke with Gerline Joseph, co-founder and executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance.
Earlier this month, on the heels of the assassination of Haiti's president, you led more than 130 organizations in sending a joint letter to the Biden administration asking for protection for Haitians and demanding a halt to detentions and deportations of Haitians seeking asylum. Why is that necessary in your view?
Since President Biden took office, 35 deportation and expulsion flights have been sent to Haiti in the middle of all the chaos. So what we saw happening specifically for Black migrants is that they will be detained immediately and then deported. And that creates this extreme pain when you are sending people who are fleeing from political turmoil, fleeing from violence, and then you would deport them without due process. Pregnant women, babies as young as just a couple of weeks old. And the majority of those people also, Yvette, have been at the US-Mexico border for a very long time. Since 2016, under President Obama, that is why we are urging the Biden administration to immediately end all deportations to Haiti and immediately release all asylum seekers who have been detained in immigration prison and allow them to proceed with their cases.
We know that the Biden administration extended temporary protected status for Haitians in May. What does that mean in real terms for Haitians seeking asylum today?
People will be eligible to apply for TPS once the register notice is published, and we are looking at about 150,000 people. But the problem is that only applies for people who are already in the country as of May 2021. So they will be able to get a job, provide for their families, provide for their loved ones as they continue the process, their immigration process here in the United States. So that is why, in view of the current political turmoil in Haiti, it is imperative that we make sure that people who are currently at the US-Mexico border get protection as well, because right now they are not eligible for TPS.
As you mentioned, there are thousands of Haitians at the US-Mexico border seeking asylum. Why don't we hear about those migrants more when we talk about the so-called migrant crisis at the southern border?
Yvette, migrants from Haiti and other Black migrants from Jamaica, Sierra Leone, Mauritania, Cameroon have been at the US-Mexico border since 2015. But the reality is the stories, the narratives are unheard of. And that is why the Haitian With Alliance continues to push for highlighting the narratives of Black migrants at the US-Mexico border. So people can understand that immigration is a Black issue, immigration is a racial justice issue, and making sure that those people who have been stuck at the US-Mexico border, who are not from Central America, who might be from the Caribbean, from Africa, and other countries, the stories are not lost in the narrative, in the big picture. We started the first Black Immigrants Bail Fund because one thing people might not know, when people get into immigration detention centers, most of the time they have to pay in order for them to get released. They will be charged anywhere between $20,000 to $50,000 in order for them to be released. Now, keep in mind, somebody who just escaped extreme violence made a journey that they almost die on the way. And the first thing that we do as a country is imprison them and charge them $50,000. We are focusing on Black immigrants because their stories are unheard, their narratives are forgotten, and their realities erased.
Guerline Joseph, founder and executive director of the Haitian Bridge Alliance, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us, Yvette.
This is PBS NewsHour Weekend, Saturday.
Finally tonight, we have an update to a story we brought you last month about an artificial habitat being built off the Maryland coast for several species of nesting shorebirds by a coalition of environmental groups and the state. When Dave Brinker and Kevin Smith took us out onto the Chincoteague Bay in Maryland earlier this summer, the only common terns we saw were decoys. They were on a new floating platform that had been installed in the hopes of attracting shorebirds like common terns looking for a place to nest. Well, it turns out that if you build it, they will come. In the last week or so, at least 4 common tern chicks have hatched on the platform. According to Brinker, who is an ecologist with the Maryland Department of Natural Resources, about 20 pairs of common terns have bred on the platform, and he estimates that there are still more than a dozen active nests with eggs. Brinker says the success of the platform as a breeding site shows how badly needed this habitat is, and that it's a satisfying development for this $100,000 project, which is a collaboration between the state of Maryland, an environmental group called Maryland Coastal Bays Program, and the local Audubon Society. While the common terns that found the platform this year do not make up for the 90% decrease in their population that Maryland has seen since 2003, Brinker told us back in June that it was important to try something.
Because we're down to such low numbers, we have had to take dramatic steps to provide some habitat to try and maintain common terns in Maryland. And it's almost like in football terms, the Hail Mary pass. This is the last-ditch effort that we can do until we can provide sand and create more natural islands.
To see more, go to our website at pbs.org/newshour. That's all for this edition of PBS NewsHour Weekend. For the latest news updates, visit pbs.org/newshour. I'm Hari Srinivasan. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and have a good night.
PBS NewsHour Weekend is made possible by Sue and Edgar Wachenheim III, Bernard and Denise Schwartz, the Cheryl and Philip Milstein family, the Anderson Family Fund, the estate of Worthington Mayo Smith, the Leonard and Norma Clorfine Foundation, the Rosalind P. Walter Foundation, Koo and Patricia Ewan, committed to bridging cultural differences in our communities, Barbara Hope Zuckerberg. We try to live in the moment, to not miss what's right in front of us. At Mutual of America, we believe taking care of tomorrow can help you make the most of today. Mutual of America Financial Group, retirement services and investments. Additional support has been provided by Consumer Cellular and by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
You're watching PBS.